Without further ado, will Utah pull off the world's first saline lake restoration? This is another presentation by a speaker that is filled with hope. We love the way he presents. It's so engaging. Let's give a big round of applause for Professor Ben Abbott.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everyone who organizes this symposium. Who thinks this is the best symposium that happens all year? Woohoo! You guys, I do too. I do too. And I want to give special recognition to my daughter, Ingrid, who got us here this morning through traffic on I-15 while I finished the presentation. So, round of applause for Ingrid. I want to recognize, first of all, that I am one of the newcomers to this issue. There are so many people in this room who have been working longer and who have done more than I have around Great Salt Lake. So this is the beginning of my engagement on Great Salt Lake. If you look closely, my students and I are presenting a poster on Utah Lake. Is this a little boomy? It's going to be closer or further away. Is that okay? We'll try that. So at that time, we were trying to protect Utah Lake from the world's largest island development, and so we came up here and thought, let's talk with the Salt Lake people, see if we can work together. When I was at that conference, it was the fall of 2022. The lake was in full-on catastrophe mode, and despite public perception, scientists are not alarmists. In fact, if you look statistically, scientists are much too conservative in communicating risk. If you look at projections of climate change, they have been underneath what has actually happened. And this takes place throughout these issues. So we got started. We released our emergency report in 2023, again with many of you who are here. And I want to zoom out for a few slides and talk about water security generally. When you look at the Earth from space, what do you see? Water. It's not just the blue, but the white, right? We are the blue marble. Our planet is defined by water. So on a planet like this, how can you have water scarcity, right? Why isn't there just unlimited water everywhere? This is a graphic from the USGS. Does anybody want to guess what do these three spheres of water represent? So this is to scale if you take all of the water in the Earth system and put it in these spheres. The big one is the saline water, mainly in the oceans, but also groundwater. This is the fresh water, and then that little dot is the water sustainably available for human use, right? So when we talk about water, it's a matter of when, how much, and what quality. So here is the floods in Guadalupe from a few months ago, right? An issue of an area suffering from not enough water long-term, but too much in the short term. Here is the most widespread picture of the global water cycle. We did an analysis back in 2017 on this. And it's beautiful. I put it in the world's best language, French. What's missing from this picture? Humans, okay? What else is missing from this picture? Okay, so you don't see any dimensions of human activity. In fact, when we analyzed around 600 water cycle diagrams from peer-reviewed papers, textbooks, and the internet, only 15% showed humans at all. Right? 85% showed a water cycle which does not exist. What else is missing? Terminal lakes, thank you. Half of the world's lake water is stored in these terminal lakes, and yet we found that exactly 0 of the diagrams showed them, right? So working with a team at BYU, and you can find all these resources for free at watercycle.byu.edu, we put together a new version of the water cycle. This is one that at least shows the saline lakes, but now you can toggle on and off the human impact. And I want to point out, humans appropriate more than half of the water that flows from land to sea every year. And when I took hydrology, I was taught the human interference or appropriation of water is so small compared to the other fluxes that you can't even show it, right? You can't even see it. That's just not correct. And this is primarily not through direct water use. It's through our land, our agricultural system, and our energy system. So to understand where water flows in the Anthropocene, you have to look. This is a diagram from Linton and Budd's amazing paper on the hydrosocial cycle. But this is a drawing from a second grader showing that in the Anthropocene, water flows toward money. It doesn't flow down gradient anymore. And in fact, it's harder to represent, but water flows toward power. Right? There are lots of examples where water could be used for a higher economic purpose when it's not. So again, remember, it's not the water that you're drinking in your mug. It's not the water that you're showering or flushing down the toilet. We're talking about the food system and the energy system. So at a global scale, what percentage of global water use is for our food system? Who says 5%? 25%? 50%? 75%? 90%? Globally, it's 90%, or sorry, 95%. So it's what we're eating, right? And that includes green, blue, and gray water use. Those three categories. Not talking about gray water use with reusing indoor water. Now, it's interesting to me. 70% of that 95% is not growing food for people. It's growing feed for livestock, and you can see that in if you take this map from WRI, I love this visualization. It takes all the kinds of land use in the contiguous US and groups them together. So for example, you can see all of the golf courses. If you were to put them together, they'd be an area of that big. Taylor Swift hangs out down here by the Christmas tree farms. Check out how much of that is not food for people. The food for people is right up here. All of the grains, all of the vegetables, all the fruits. But this is that animal agriculture piece of that. So again, whatever your choices are, it's really important to recognize the food system and the energy system are where it's at. So when we talk about water security, there are lots of different definitions. If you're super boring, you use the UN's definition here. I do want to point out this last part. Water security is basically having enough water. And the UN and just about everybody else recognizes it's not just enough water for human demand, but it's also enough water to support the ecosystems that allow preserving a climate of peace and political stability. Right? And this is a lesson of geopolitics nationally. So you can express water security in this way. When supply is greater than demand over a long period of time of water of adequate quality, you've got water security. But how do we get there? What's the recipe? This is my favorite recipe. There are lots of different ways you can teach this and describe this. But Rhett Larson from ASU has this fabulous book. He's a water lawyer, but the book is good, I promise, called Just Add Water. And he says the 3 steps to water security are, number 1, understand water. How much is sustainably available? How much does it change from year to year, from decade to decade? Number 2, eliminate waste. Conserve water. Maximize it. Figure out, okay, where is the water going? Where is it not doing what we don't want it to do? And then number 3, after you've maxed out 1 and 2, augment water as little as possible. And the reason why it's ordered this way is at the top, you've got a bunch of co-benefits. It's very efficient, right? If you leave more water in the river, that benefits not just the farmers, but it also if you're able to grow crops with less water and leave more in the river, that makes the farmers more resilient to drought. It also leaves all the ecosystem services that the rivers do. Right here, they restore our aquifers. We have mainly losing reaches of rivers. Down at the bottom, if you're relying on augmenting supply, this is not resilient. It's very vulnerable. If you have shifts in how much water is available because of environmental change, it falls apart. If you have geopolitical conflict, it falls apart. Plus, if you're building these pipelines, dams, reservoirs, there are big local impacts. So looking at it this way, we should take this equation and express it in a different way. Right? The way to water security is to make sure that demand is lower than supply. Now, the issue is, of course, when we want to change supply, that's trying to control nature, which we've tried to do for a really long time. But I don't know if that's any harder than trying to change society. And in fact, humans have become a force of nature, something which by definition can't be controlled. So how do we change society? This is the key question for me, not just about saline lakes, but about water security overall. So now let's apply this to Great Salt Lake. Here are the stats as of today. If you go to growtheflowutah.org, you can look at the full suite of statistics. But most of the lake is gone, right? Over 2/3 of its water. Dave Tarbotten, Merck and Tarbotten released their analysis that estimates the lake is 15 feet lower than it would be without human water consumption. So this is an area the size of the state of New Hampshire where there's 15 feet less water on top of it. So much water has been lost that the Earth's crust is actually rebounding, not just from Lake Bonneville, but the loss of mass from Great Salt Lake itself has triggered a bunch of micro-earthquakes around the lake. And the number on the bottom is the most controversial one. I won't do a poll of how many people dislike me for this number, but I stand behind it. In 2022, when I started engaging on Great Salt Lake, the lake wasn't 5 years away from collapse. If we're talking about the food web, it could have been 5 months from collapse. Right? If there hadn't been a huge infusion of water, we would have gone over that salinity threshold. So an ecosystem doesn't die the way an organism does. It loses function. So we're not talking about the lake being completely gone, but as far as the things that the lake provides for our society, they are threatened within a number of months to years. This is what the major tributary to the lake looks like most of the year. Now, it's interesting, when we turn off our diversions, it actually comes back. And so I was out on the lake bed a couple weeks ago, and the Bear River is flowing and makes it to the lake right now, but it didn't throughout the summer. So for us, the decline of the lake is caused primarily, this is data from the strike team, 80% of it is local water consumption, around 10% of it is long-term environmental change, and 10% of it is that fluctuation, the drought. And this is good news. If this was primarily caused by climate change, like the decline of the Caspian Sea, there wouldn't be that much that we could do here locally to address that issue. But because we here locally are the problem, we can be the solution. If we break down that water use, I want to point out, first of all, that around 1/3 of it is happening in Idaho and Wyoming. Anybody from those states here today? Okay, let's talk afterwards. They haven't yet come to the table, but we're making progress on that. And then we actually use a smaller percentage of the water here for agriculture than we do globally. Right? That's because we have such a big urban population. So it's only 3/4 that's going to ag. And these are all the consumptive water use numbers. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we know why it matters. But I do want to just point out a few things that have struck me, right? If we think about the effect on human health from the dust, the effect on local climate and economy from the loss of evaporation from the lake, and then the impact on biosphere integrity at a hemispheric scale. The lake provides around $2.5 billion of economic activity each year. This is, we've long known about lake effect snow. The reason why all of Utah's destination ski resorts are downwind of the lake isn't by chance, right? Much of that greatest snow on Earth is coming from the lake. But here's new data showing that half of the rain and snow that falls in the valleys along the Wasatch Front, half of it comes from evaporation from the lake. So if you run the hydrological model and say, what's the impact of having that lake there? It doubles the precipitation in the valleys. So the difference between Wendover and Salt Lake City, very similar, in all other respects except Salt Lake City is downwind of Great Salt Lake. Right? So the urban forests, the humidity, the more temperate climate that we enjoy, it's literally thanks to Great Salt Lake. And when these lakes have been lost in other areas of the world, you see desertification, right? Loss of that flow, that local source of water vapor. So we've got to stop thinking about, has anybody heard, if we released all of the water in the reservoirs to Great Salt Lake, it'd just evaporate and be gone in 3 months. You don't have to raise your hand. I hear that a lot. First of all, we're not talking about emptying out all the reservoirs. We're talking about conserving water so each year we can let more flow by while still having storage necessary for human use. But second of all, water that evaporates from the lake is not wasted. The third law of ecology is nature knows best. Right? We need to learn from these systems rather than try to re-engineer them. And then we've all seen time series like this of toxic dust blowing into our communities. But I want to point out it isn't just Salt Lake City. In fact, if you go north, the communities from Ogden to Brigham City are being hit more often. And then cities to the south, this is a picture that I took in late August on a Saturday from my home in Provo, Utah, looking across Orem, Utah. A dust storm came off the lake. It was Saturday afternoon. Families were out barbecuing. If you were to look at the AQI, the air quality index, it showed it was green, right? Because we don't have the sensors to pick up these larger particles. Now, it's not just that we're particularly bad at managing water. In fact, if you look around the world, all we have are failures. These lakes are collapsing all around the world. There are about 120 of them. And globally, we've lost 60% of that Saline Lake area. And there's not a single success story. Now, you could say Mono Lake, right? They stopped the decline of the lake. I agree, that's an amazing success story. They have not yet restored the lake. Right? I was out at the Chautauqua earlier this year. Even though it was defined by law that they had to achieve that, almost 40 years later, they have not yet restored the lake. Similarly, Walker Lake, they have stopped the decline in Nevada, but have not yet restored it. Lake Urmia, is anybody following what's going on in Iran right now? So a huge intense water crisis. Lake Urmia, this very similar water body to Great Salt Lake, dried up in just a few years. And the nearest city of Tabriz saw a spike in 41 different health conditions. And not just asthma and COPD, as important as those conditions are, but 7 kinds of cancer, birth defects, neurodegenerative disease. There is no separation between environmental health and community health, right? We have to solve this problem. This is a picture from Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. It's 300 miles from the Aral Sea, from the former Aral Sea. Right? Where the Aral Sea once was, we now have the world's newest desert, the Aralsk Desert. This is a picture that was taken 10 days after a dust storm came off the Aral Sea. 10 days, and they still were dealing with air quality issues like this. Now, the collapse of the Aral Sea caused the permanent relocation of between 100,000 and 500,000 people. There's such a big range because this is former Soviet Union. There wasn't good accounting of how many people were there. But if you look at the people who stayed behind, 3/4 of them are living under the poverty line. The farmers aren't able to grow crops unless they pre-rinse their fields to remove the salts that have been deposited on their fields. And the public health outcomes have been awful. Right, so again, if we are interested in continued flourishing in this region, we have to restore Great Salt Lake. And what's different about Great Salt Lake is there is no other saline lake in the world with so many people downwind. Right? If you look at the area that this dust is already hitting, so it's beyond the Wasatch Front, it's 3 to 5 million downwinders. And just looking economically, it's over $1 trillion in infrastructure. And already around 16% of Utahns are asking, should I stay? I get calls all the time saying, is it safe for me to send my kids to the University of Utah? And as a BYU professor, I say no. So perception, right? What is our connection with our home, right? We've got to solve this. So one of the most controversial questions is, how much water do we need? And it's fascinating to me that this is a controversial question, because there has been utter consensus on this issue from the beginning. Certainly since 2023, when our report came out, when the strike team report came out. The numbers are the same. I'm actually going to skip this over here. This is a little bit more technical, but I want to make sure we've got time for conversation. So here are the numbers. On the left-hand column, if you increase the inflow to the lake by that amount, then it gives you, on the right column, this chance of reaching a healthy lake level. Not within 5 years, not within 10 years, but ever. Right? You can run that lake water balance out. So I've put in the middle column, translating that amount of increase of water to what it corresponds to with the percent decrease in our water consumption. So if we want to have more than a 2/3 chance of saving Great Salt Lake, we've got to reduce our water consumption by around 45%. And that can be really sobering, right? When you think, well, wait, I can't drink 45% less water. Unless you start thinking creatively and start drinking Coke, then you can make it there. These are really big changes. How much have we delivered so far? All of our efforts, and by our, I'm not talking about our organization, but the state, the federal government, advocacy groups, management, we haven't yet made a measurable difference in lake level. The current estimates are that we're delivering around 20 to 30,000 acre feet more a year than was flowing there before. So that's 2 to 3% of what we need to restore the lake. And again, sobering, but remember, has anybody here started a business? Got some hands? There's a period of time where you're putting in a lot of effort and real progress is being made, but you're still not making money. Right? And that's where we have been. So it's so important to recognize we have come light years. Right? Major changes to Utah's water law. Major changes in public awareness around this issue. So I don't despair when I say we've only come 2 to 3%. We've started, right? It's starting to accelerate. But unlike the midterms that my students are taking right now, you can't call the lake and ask for an extension. Right? You can't negotiate with hydrology. And so we've got to be clear-eyed. For me, being optimistic is being realistic and saying, what is the threat? How much do we need to change? And the world is watching. Right? Almost every week, there's a new piece in national or international media on what's going on right here. Of course, the Olympics has just turned that up. So my question for us is, how do we change the ending? How do we make our community the first anywhere to achieve this? And I love, one of my mentors was Terry Chapin. And he put out this paper a few years ago asking, how do we actually, this concept of earth stewardship is not just a religious idea, it's also in the ecological literature. How do we establish a relationship where we are caretakers, where we are replenishing the earth? And what they observed was, often we focus up here with policies. We think if we get the right policy in place, that's going to trickle down and change the system. But the deeper shift is when it's values, when it's identity. And if the values are there, the policies will follow. And I am very hopeful that the system intent, a lot of those values are in place. So we've been working for the last 2 years with Grow the Flow to organize, to connect. You may not know everybody who's on this slide, but I promise you that if you look them up one by one, there will be someone on this slide, no matter what your political background is, who triggers you. It's going to be somebody who you're like, I can't believe that they are involved in this, right? I said that joke the other day, and somebody said, well, yeah, Ben, it's you. Yeah, you're on the slide. So, of course, people are triggered. We've got progressive environmental authors. We've got the guy who was Donald Trump's boss for 15 years, right? The producer of The Apprentice, and then a bunch of people in the middle. So we have been going around showing people the lake, talking with donors. My favorite picture here is in the upper left. High school student Izzy Kachatarian called us up and said, "Could you give us $200 to buy some chicken?" And we're like, "Sure." She invited all of the student body presidents from Salt Lake County to meet together and come up with plans on what they could do. Isn't that amazing, you guys? Does anybody get the shivers? Like, we have to solve this, and it's going to take all of us. Now, all these conversations led to the formation of another group called Great Salt Lake Rising. Interestingly, much less political diversity here in this group, but a lot more money, a lot more power and influence. And we announced in August that we were forming and started gathering commitments. And then in September, on September 24th, something really important happened. And it's not the fact that my daughter won the Pinewood Derby, though she did. What happened on that day was the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President announced a commitment, along with Great Salt Lake Rising, to restore Great Salt Lake by 2034. Right, this is called GSL 2034. It did not come out of nowhere. And it did not just come from Grow the Flow and Great Salt Lake Rising. It came from everything that all of you have been doing, many of you for decades. But it's a moment where we now have a shared commitment. And what I really appreciate is we're not talking about an amount of money that we're going to spend on the lake, because you don't fill up the lake with money. Actually, somebody did call me the other day and say, "Have you thought about using Bitcoin?" You know, that takes up even less money than physical currency, or less volume than physical currency, so that's not going to work. But just a few weeks after that, we all met together. So these are the families, the businesses, the church representatives, the state representatives. I love seeing all these people, many of whom have not always got along, listening to the Great Salt Lake Commissioner, even laughing sometimes. But this was my favorite picture from that event. It does not matter what kind of footwear you like, you are needed in this rescue. And the goal is to go from this complicated ecosystem. I want to recognize, I haven't mentioned, the people spending the most time on the lake by far are those in our local, state, and federal agencies working on water. Can we give them a hand? I mean, it's just amazing to see what they are doing. Thank you. And a personal apology, because I sometimes misrepresent and I'm off base. I'm sorry if I've caused you headaches, but I'm very grateful for the work that you're doing. So we want to go from that to this, where we are working together to conserve water, accelerate conservation, and then, most importantly, build trust. Because trust is what's lacking most in the system. We have plenty of water. We don't live in a desert, despite what you read on social media, right? We have more than twice as much precipitation as an ecological desert has. We have plenty of water. It's not a supply issue, it's a demand issue. And this has started to happen. This is an event from just a few days ago. The Ogden mayor, Representative Jill Coford, who's at the head of developing legislation around the lake, meeting together with Chandler Rosenberg and Jake Sarago, right, coming together to put these things in place. The Great Salt Lake Interfaith Action Coalition, Joan, put together this amazing event at the Cathedral of the Madeleine, bringing together members of dozens of different faiths and people with no religious beliefs to celebrate, to consolidate. Just on Friday, my faith's newest apostle, Gerald Cosset, gave an address at BYU. Guess what he talked about? Great Salt Lake. His first public address since being called as an apostle. He said, "I reaffirm the church's commitment to participate in this World First Rescue." You had to have a registration to go to the event, so the students ended up on 3 balconies looking down to see what was going on. Okay, so it's going to take a lot of money, it's going to take a lot of work, and we've got a very short period of time to pull this off. but I believe that we're going to do it. I wanted to acknowledge there are still remaining points of disagreement. Who can be involved? Who's in charge? What should the messaging be about this? Right? Should we be pivoting right now to more constructive, hopeful messaging? This is the race before the games. We're going to show the world how Utah is different. Or do we need to continue emphasizing the risks of failure? But this is the graph that I'm going to be thinking about through 2034. And actually, we want to get it at the airport. Wouldn't that be awesome? Where we could just see, okay, here's our goal. We've committed to be here. And here's where we are right now. So I want to end with this little poll while we take questions from you. But if you scan the QR code, or if you go to, what does it say? pollev.com/Ben554. You can put your input in. What do you think we will do by 2034? Is the lake going to continue to decline? Are we going to stabilize it at the current low level? Will we make some progress? We'll turn the corner? Or will it be restored? So again, I'll go back to that, but I want to end here with this. This is my recipe for saving the lake. It's also my personal recipe for maintaining mental health. But whether or not you believe in the Bible, I think this is a powerful concept. Are we doing this out of fear? No. We're doing this out of love. And how are we going to do it? With a sound mind, right? With good data, with an understanding of what's happening. And then the power to turn that information into action. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we have time for questions. So feel free to come up. Let's see how many results we've gotten. I'll probably just leave this up until, okay, we got 65 results. I'll pull it up at the end. Yeah.
Hi. So I understand that you said we have to lower our water use in order to save the Great Salt Lake, but with AI rising and Utah pushing to be one of the leading sources of AI data centers, how do you think that's going to play out in the future?
Yeah, so AI is really interesting. Chandler Rosenberg, actually, here with Stewardship Utah, and Jill Coford are working on a bill that would require all data centers to have non-consumptive water use. If that happens, data centers can actually become our friend, because they could use the water non-consumptively for cooling and then return it to the wastewater treatment plants to flow to the lake. So they could become mega toilets. Is Marianne Carr in here? Marianne Carr, she's one of my personal heroes. She wrote a blog post called "Flush Once for Yourself and Once for the Lake." Because currently the most reliable source of water to Great Salt Lake is the wastewater treatment plants, right? So unlike other areas where AI and data centers can be huge threats, we're trying to refill our inland sea. So they actually could be an asset if we make sure that the legislation and regulation's there to help. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, so many questions. But so the question I've got is about ag and ag water. You know, I mean, ag uses a huge amount of water, but I'm curious if we're potentially throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because and I'm wondering if it's been quantified and looked at and accounted for, but how much ag water actually supports ecosystems. So like, you know, flood irrigation goes into groundwater aquifers, which goes into rivers and supports riparian areas. And as you get to 100%, you know, efficient irrigation, you know, they don't use that saved water and put it back into the system. They grow more crops with it because they have a water right for it. And so my question is, how do we address that? Has it been quantified? How important is that? Yeah. Let's not do more damage while we're trying to save the lake.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Currently, there's a shortfall between the ag optimization program and dedicating that saved water to the lake, right? This is an obstacle. Originally, that bill had that transfer of water in it. If you irrigate less land or irrigate more efficiently, and you leave that water in the river, the riparian area, the aquifer, everything benefits, and the farmer. Okay. If, on the other hand, you irrigate more efficiently, but expand the area that you're irrigating, then you can have an increase in consumptive water use. So that can lead to some of these unintended consequences. But as a hydrologist, this idea that nature needs us to flood irrigate doesn't make any sense, right? The rivers have been refilling the aquifers for millennia, right? That's how the system's supposed to be maintained. But there is a current legislative shortfall. We need to connect water conservation with dedication and delivery to the lake.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Yeah.
So in the last few years, I've told my family members and friends to stop praying for water, but to start praying for better policy. And I just wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what policy change or legislation that's in the works or projects do you feel would be the most impactful on restoring lake levels?
Yeah, thanks for that question and comment. And I'd just like to say, does anybody remember how dark things looked around 6 months ago as far as prospects for making progress on the lake? I got a call from Terry Tempest Williams, and she said, Ben, I'm afraid that people have stopped praying for the lake. And you know, when Governor Cox called for this interdenominational day of prayer, he was excoriated nationally. John Oliver, it's really ugly, right? These stupid backwaters religious people, right? I can't believe that they're thinking that prayer is going to help. But here we have Terry Tempest Williams calling and saying, I'm worried that you've stopped praying. Because what people pray for, they focus on. Right? So if we're just saying, let's not be accountable, right? Give us another windfall, right? Fix this problem by increasing supply. I agree that prayer isn't necessarily helpful. If, on the other hand, we're asking, what policies can we change? What behaviors can we change? How can I be a part of the solution? Then we should welcome prayer or meditation or whatever you want to do, right? Like, let's stop the friendly fire hitting each other. As far as what is the highest priority, there is a comprehensive legislative package being put together right now. And this is a collaboration between the Commissioner's Office, Great Salt Lake Rising, University of Utah. A bunch of people are contributing to it. The ag optimization and that gap between the saved water and delivering it to the lake is the perfect example of how, if we do this piecemeal, it is not as efficient. Right? We see the same thing with secondary water metering. Do we want to have secondary water metering? Absolutely. Has it increased water flow to the lake? Not yet. Because it's not connected. That conservation is not connected with water going to the lake. So incentivizing cities to conserve water and even use their future water rights, if we allowed them to lease that to the lake, then they have a financial incentive to do more. Right? We can start accelerating. But we need this wartime effort. We need a comprehensive package. So let's work together. And the invitation to everyone here is to join this coalition. Right now, the portal is growtheflowutah.org. Share your ideas, get plugged into communication. And when that package is moving through the legislature, we will keep you updated every time there's a committee hearing. But the University of Utah will be releasing a comprehensive policy assessment of like what the options are. So that'll be coming out soon. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, you guys. Can I show the survey? Bob, do you want to talk? And I will pull this up. And
I think he just illustrated my favorite part of the symposium. He put that talk together in the car on the way here. The people that present here are just dripping with talent, and that's the secret sauce we have here. All of you.
Okay, here we are. Drum roll. Okay. Okay. So it looks like only 15% of you are right. So hey, I love you all. Thank you so much.